No.
Hmm. And Ilana, you used the link I emailed you? Or did you get sent a link separately? Oops, sorry, I don't hear you.
Been sent separately.
Oh, sorry. I didn't get one separately. No, I just
Okay.
used the one you sent.
I got one separately. I had the one that you sent me, but then I registered and got one separately, and that's the link that I used.
Okay, let me send her that link.
The one to register. Because the link that you sent me, I think would get me in just as you. And there might be a max to how many you can do that way.
I started the connector video, so by that time she can join.
Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski, Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson, Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff, and other initiatives including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's Growable program and our Perspective series.
Also coming up on July 22nd, we have an Accessible Community Forum on accessible housing in British Columbia.
Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society.
Okay, you guys can start.
All right. Hello, everyone. So we're having an issue getting one of our attendees in. She says her link is now not working at all. If we might get some help getting a second link, if you don't mind putting it in the chat, I can send it to her.
I will do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jesse Mercury. I am the host of the Major Pain Podcast. Each week on the show, I interview people living with chronic illness and disability, often focusing on invisible illness, rare disease, chronic pain, and undiagnosed illness. And I'm really excited and honored to be given this opportunity by the Connect Trust Society to moderate this discussion today on speaking out about chronic illness. In our society, there is constant pressure to remain silent about our pain and our health challenges, to put forward a brave face and mask what we're going through to avoid making people uncomfortable. Most of us have probably experienced that moment where we try to open up about our health to someone, only to have their eyes glaze over before they quickly change the subject. So living through chronic illness and disability can be incredibly isolating, and to feel silenced by society makes this isolation even worse. So today we're going to talk about being public in our health journeys, about making content, spreading awareness, and building community around something often experienced in isolation. And joining me today, we have two incredible guests, Ilana Jacqueline and Aimee Stephanie Perez. We're still working on getting Aimee into the room. I'm going to send her a new link. But while we do that, Ilana, let's get to know you a little bit. If you don't mind introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then tell us what is your major pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so happy to be here. I had such a great time on your podcast.
Thank you.
If anyone in the audience has not listened to it yet, get on that because it is such an incredible show. So many amazing guests and such an amazing host. And I was honored to be on the show. Again, my name is Ilana Jacqueline. I'm an author of the book Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness. And I'm also a patient advocacy strategist and a patient, of course, myself. And my major pain is primary immune deficiency disease, dysautonomia, and chronic migraine.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I will say that both of our guests today, Ilana and Aimee, were guests on the Major Pain Podcast, two incredible episodes. And when I was asked to put this presentation together, you were the first two people that I thought of, and I was so thrilled that you both agreed to be here. So before we start talking about being public about chronic illness, let's talk a little bit about the history of our chronic illnesses. So Ilana, when did yours first present, and when were you first diagnosed?
Sure. So my disease is genetic, and I started showing symptoms basically at birth. And primary immune deficiency disease is a disease where you have a really hard time fighting off infections and a really hard time recovering from them. So kind of had a childhood full of kind of your run-of-the-mill basic infections. But every time I went to the doctor, it was, oh, you're just kind of sickly, or, oh, these are childhood illnesses. This is pretty common. Even though I was hospitalized for some of those, and they were quite difficult, but I was not diagnosed until I was a full-grown adult, 19 years old. And I didn't even find a doctor who knew how to treat my disorder until I was 31 years old. And I'm 32 now. So.
Wow. How did that make you feel? I mean, spending a whole childhood knowing something was wrong, going to doctors over and over, having them tell you it was all in your head. How did you start to feel about it after a while?
Oh, very, very frustrated. I think, it's taken me so long to understand, like, what is that even called when a doctor kind of like dismisses you or, doesn't take your concerns seriously. And that is medical gaslighting, which I know so many patients have experienced. For me, it just really made me feel ashamed. Shame was such a big part of growing up with an undiagnosed chronic illness, because it really put into my head the question of, well, why can't I handle what everybody else must be handling? So like when I would go to school and I would, one kid would be gone for a cold and they'd be out of school for a day or two, and then they come back and they'd be fine. And I just couldn't wrap my head around that, because when I was sick, it was, I was out, like I was comatose and I was very ill, and it took more than one round of antibiotics to get me fixed up. And so I felt very isolated and very confused and very ashamed of just not being able to cope the way that, it seemed my doctor seemed to think that I could cope if I tried harder. And so I didn't really understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still undiagnosed. Actually, I've had a mystery illness on and off throughout my whole life. It first presented in second grade, we think. I was in a very moldy classroom and I got really sick. So we're still kind of unsure if that was the first sign of my illness, or maybe if I just, was having an issue with the mold in the classroom. It came back in high school. And again, it was because it was a really moldy classroom that I was in. Get out of the mold, and then I get better. And it seems like, okay, well, I'm just, really sensitive to mold. And then in college, I got really sick again. And this was much more serious than I'd ever had in the past. I started having, muscle spasms and, cognitive issues, difficulty with my mobility. It was like a switch was flipped and the signals from my brain stopped going to my legs. I wouldn't be able to walk down the hall to get myself to the bathroom. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they all said, you're fine. We can't find anything wrong. We've run all these tests. Everything looks fine. You should go back to your life and go about your life. I'm like, okay, well, what about all the symptoms? The symptoms haven't gone away. And doctors told me that it was, psychosomatic, all in my head, that I was, my brain was converting my stress into physical problems. And I would hear these things over and over again for years. I'm 37 now, and I just started over a year or two ago with a new hospital, and things have definitely been different. Okay, so Aimee is in the room, but it's saying that it won't let her show herself. So if we can still get a little bit of tech support, that would be great. We'd love to be able to see and hear Aimee. I see a box that says Aimee, so I know she's in here now. There we go. Okay, now it looks like she has the option to unmute, I hope. Thank you so much, tech support. We really, really appreciate your help with this. So I finally started with a new medical center within the last couple of years. And finally, I'm being taken seriously. We're having all these new tests done. I've had hundreds of tests done that I've never had before. Well, maybe almost 100, not quite hundreds, but dozens and dozens of tests that have never been run. And I finally have a doctor who recognizes that sometimes we can't diagnose certain things, but it's still important to try to listen to and treat the patient and try to help them. And, I'm still searching. I just had genetic testing done and I'm still searching for answers. I actually have a new scoop. I just got my results this morning. And Ilana, I know from talking to you on the podcast that you had a genetic variant of unknown significance.
Yes.
I got the exact same result this morning. So
Wow.
still no answers. Basically, it means, this could be something. It might be nothing. We don't really know where to go from here, which is kind of the answer that I've gotten over and over throughout my journey. But yeah, I'm sure you have something to say about that because you've experienced it as well.
I'm very excited for you. One of the things with rare diseases and undiagnosed diseases is really starting to understand the value of genetic testing. And for anyone who is not familiar with it, having whole genome sequencing or any genome sequencing to look at, your full genetic material to see if we can find, maybe the one variation that is abnormal that can really help lead to a diagnosis. And the exciting thing is that, if you end up like me and Jesse, where you have a variant of unknown significance, it means, hooray, we found something that is abnormal, which I know that's a strange reaction to finding something abnormal in your test results, is to be excited. But for anyone who has an undiagnosed disease, any clue is a great clue. So having a variant of unknown significance, even to say, okay, so we don't exactly know what's wrong, but something is wrong. You can, now that you have your sequencing done, you can keep running that. New genes are discovered and analyzed every day. So the more, if you're able to get your genetic testing done and, keep checking it every couple of months, you can send it out to different doctors, different universities, different genetic sequencing labs. Maybe in a year or two, we'll have more information on that specific variant that you have. So it's a little bit of hope. So I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's not exactly how I've been looking at it since this literally just happened like 3 hours ago.
Oof.
I'm just kind of right in the midst of feeling the frustration of just hoping that there would be an answer,
Yeah.
So that's a really great way of looking at it. And I've had so many test results come back where it's like, this thing is a little bit off in this direction or that direction. I've had some false positive tests. Ooh, I see a photo. I think we're getting close. Are we getting close? I'm very excited to have Aimee join this discussion. Aimee, if you have not yet tried again to re-enter the chat, I would give it another shot because it looks like something just changed. Multitasking here. Yeah, and the way that you think about things, the way that you process things, the way that you the narrative you tell yourself about chronic illness can be so important. Okay, we are trying. Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I used to be a live sound technician, so I totally have a lot of experience troubleshooting and trying to get things to work. And I really appreciate the hard work going on behind the scenes to get Aimee in the chat. So I know Aimee was trying to enable her camera and was unable to, so it looks like something might have changed. So Aimee, if you want to give it another shot, let's try it again. But we'll just keep going through our outline here. We might back up and get a bit of Aimee's story once we get her in here. So Ilana, we've heard a little bit about how you felt about your illness, about this shame that you felt before getting diagnosed. So after you get that diagnosis, before you start being public about it, how did you feel about that diagnosis once you finally had it?
Gosh, how I felt about it before. I mean, I was excited to finally have an answer. I knew that it wasn't the full answer, the primary immune deficiency disease diagnosis. But but I was just excited to know that like after pushing so hard and advocating for myself, like we got something. And I really don't think there was any point where I was scared or, like, oh no, like a terrible diagnosis, because at the point that I was diagnosed, I was at my absolute sickest. I mean, I was walking around as a zombie. I was infection after infection, and it just almost nothing is worse than not knowing. And so I felt excitement. I felt relief, huge relief at being diagnosed. And it kind of wiped clean the slate of that shame and that, concern that like there was something extremely wrong with me that was not physical, that was just functional. And, as a person, something was wrong. And then at this point when I was diagnosed, I was like, well, okay, I'm still me. I'm just me with this disease. So I was relieved.
Yeah, absolutely. It's validation that what you're experiencing is not all in your head.
Yes.
And for people who are not familiar with your disease, can you tell us a little bit about the symptoms and how it works, what it does to your body?
Sure. So start with the primary immune deficiency disease. Primary immune deficiency disease, the one that I have is called hypogamma-globulin anemia, which basically means your immune system is built up of all of these different barriers. And I have like an open gate. Like it's just, I have a complete missing part of my immune system that would normally be used to fight off infections, bacteria, viruses. So whenever you get a cold infection, it gets pretty bad. Your body starts to fight back. You get a fever. That's the sign that your body is fighting back. I don't get fevers. My body doesn't fight back. So it takes like a very hefty dose of antibiotics to go in and treat an infection for me. And there is other treatment for primary immune deficiency disease. There is something called IVIG, which is intravenous immunoglobulin therapy. And you can either do that like once a month at an infusion center where you're kind of hooked up to an IV full of donor plasma. And that is the actual literal replacement of the missing part of your immune system. They kind of take the blood and circulate it down to just the immunoglobulins that you're missing. So I'm really fortunate. And I know I'm coming off pretty optimistic at this point, but like I'm pretty fortunate because of all the rare diseases, only 5% of them have an FDA approved treatment. And my disease is one of those diseases. So I have this immunotherapy that I do. For me, I do it at home. I do a subcutaneous version, and I do that every week. And that helps me live. Like that helps mitigate all the symptoms of my disease, which is easily catching infections and having a hard time fighting them off. And as someone who lived so many years with such severe infections, to now have some kind of treatment and, help with that is so phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah. Having a rare disease, do you run into doctors not knowing what it is? Do you run into
Yeah.
Do you run into, you try to get help from doctors and they're just like, I have no idea what to do for you?
I mean, it's interesting because I was diagnosed by an infectious disease doctor, and infectious disease doctors do not treat immune deficiency. They can diagnose it. In fact, they're great for diagnosing all kinds of weird, funky diseases. So I was very fortunate to find a doctor, have him diagnose me. And then he was like, best of luck. I don't know what to do with this disease. So he sends me off to an immunologist, and I bounce around kind of from immunologist to immunologist in South Florida. There
Hooray!
she is. Aimee has joined the chat.
We see you. We do not hear you. It looks like you are muted.
Still on mute.
Still on mute.
I had to join with my cell phone. Sorry, guys.
Hooray. Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to see your face. Welcome, Aimee Stephanie Perez.
Sorry, guys.
And
I'm
thank you so much.
I'm mortified right now. That's never happened, but sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. We're thrilled to have you. Yeah.
Troubleshooting the what really matters is, did you get it to work? And the answer is yes. So thank you so much. Ilana, I don't want to interrupt you mid-sentence.
No, it's okay. But anyway, I was lucky to have an infectious disease doctor diagnose me. But yes, finding doctors who actually understood my rare disease and knew how to treat it literally took until I was 31 years old. So absolutely, I've had that experience, and it's not uncommon in the rare disease world at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aimee, welcome. Thank you so much for making it work. We're so excited to see you. So let's get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about who you are, and Aimee, what is your major pain?
Well, my name is Aimee Perez. I'm from LA, and my major pain is plaque psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis.
So for anyone who's unfamiliar, tell us about what that is.
So basically, my disease fighting cells are just kind of attacking my skin and other parts of my body that causes inflammation. And it causes a lot of fatigue, a lot of pain in my joints, and my skin flares very badly with like scaly, itchy, painful plaques all over the place.
Yeah. And I remember, your episode of the podcast is one of my favorites as well. And I remember hearing you talk about being out in public and having people look at you like you were diseased or not wanting to be close to you. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that feels like?
Yeah, that's happened many, many times. It's even happened at like doctor's offices where I've like wanted to donate blood and nurses won't even want to touch me, even though and that's pretty heart-wrenching because you just assume that like they know and they know it's not contagious. But
and also I need your blood. So what are they doing?
Yes, it was a children's hospital blood drive. I was mortified. I was like so excited to do it too, because my dad had like severe anemia at one point. So like I was like, yay, I'm gonna do this finally. And literally she looked at me and went like this, like, and I was like, oh my gosh. And they refused to take my blood. It didn't happen.
Wow.
Or I was at the vet last week and the vet tech comes in. He's like, he stops walking towards me and he says, are you okay? And I was like, yes. Like, I'm like, what's going on? He's like, do you have ringworm? Because we had a bad case of that at the vet last week. I'm like, oh no, psoriasis. So yeah, it doesn't feel great. Or when people kind of like purposely don't want to touch you. And I think I told you this, I'm not sure, but like I went years without being touched by anyone.
Wow.
And it wasn't until a friend of mine like went out of her way to touch me. And she's like, I realized people probably don't touch you. And I was reduced to tears. But yes, it's very, I think especially now with like the pandemic and everything, like people even get weirder about it. I find that's actually happening more. People are just like afraid of anything that could potentially be contagious, but it is very like emotionally heavy. It really is. And you just kind of want to stay at home more. Like, it's just like, why go out if people can be mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I made the transition in the last year and a half from, over the course of the last 4 years, I've started using mobility aids. Maybe 2, 3, I don't know. I started using a cane first, and it was, I think after COVID had started. So I guess within the last couple of years, and the way that people would look at me changed immediately, and then I upgraded a little over a year ago to a wheelchair, and all of a sudden this invisible illness became completely visible. There's something wrong with this person. This person is using a wheelchair. And it was really, really eye-opening for me to make that transition, because having an invisible illness is incredibly difficult because nobody believes you. Nobody accepts what you're experiencing. You try to tell people and it's like, okay, buddy. Yeah, sounds rough, whatever. I have a credit card bill that I need to pay off. People just don't care. But then you transition into having something visible, and all of a sudden you are a pariah. People, I can't even tell you the amount of space that people take around me in the grocery store when I'm there in my wheelchair is insane, and the worst experience that I've had is I was, going up a hill, and this is, my way that I can get around freely. My wheelchair has been an incredibly wonderful thing in my life. And I'm an ambulatory wheelchair user. So I have good days where I can walk, and I have bad days where I can't. I spoke about earlier about that feeling of like the signals being blocked from my brain to my legs. On those days, I use the wheelchair. And I can now go out and do things on those days, whereas before I'd be stuck inside just wondering why I was on the couch all day. And now I can go out and do things. And I'm always excited to be outside. When I'm in my wheelchair, I love being outside. And, this is my personal experience with my wheelchair. A lot of people's experiences are different, but I've heard from several people that they feel similarly, that their wheelchair is their freedom. Because, I can't like go for a walk around the block on most days, but I can go for a roll. So it's been really life-changing for me. And when I'm going up a hill, that's my exercise, and I'm really excited to get it. And this one time, this guy just came up and started pushing my wheelchair without asking me, without saying any word to me, and almost got my fingers caught in the wheelchair. And I made a post about this on TikTok. I've heard from people that they have had their fingers broken from this, manual wheelchair users. So he just starts pushing my wheelchair, and I start screaming at him to stop. And he's like, no, I'm going to help. No, I'm helping. And I start screaming at him. I flip the brakes on, and he just keeps pushing me. And it's just, this was my first wheelchair. It was horrible tread on the wheels. So I'm just sliding up the hill at this point with wheels locked. And I like turn around and I scream at him, no. I scream at him, no. And that's the only way I could get him to stop. And the reason I'm telling this story is because people don't understand the needs of individual people with, any sort of disability or chronic illness. And everyone's needs are different. So for me, it was this wake-up call. It's like, I'm in this position now. I have lived on both sides of this. I continue to live on both sides of this, where some days I can walk and other days I can't. So I want to be public about my experiences. I want to tell the world what I'm experiencing. I want to tell the world about medical gaslighting, to expect that when you go in with an invisible illness, that doctors are not going to listen to you and not believe you. I want to tell the world that you're not alone, that there's a whole bunch of us out there experiencing similar things. And, every single episode of the podcast, every person I talk to, I find something that I relate to, even though we always have different diseases. Well, maybe because I don't even know what disease I have. So maybe I have the same disease as someone. But building community, talking about it, being public has made a huge difference in my life. So I have more to say about this. Before I do, I want to hear from each of you about beginning your journey with your public activism, being public about what you're experiencing. Aimee, I remember some amazing stories that you told on the podcast about the t-shirts that you made. So tell us about your public activism, Aimee. When did that start?
It started about 2014. I was in a really bad spot with my skin. I mentioned this to you before, but I had a really traumatic event happen in 2008. And then a couple years later, my father passed. And then I also had my own ectopic pregnancy. So my mental and emotional health was so bad, and my body was suffering. And I was just in such a dark place emotionally. And I was in a kind of a victim mode and a little bit angry, and why me? And I'm so young and my friends get to do this and I don't. And I just sat there and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And the way that I use social media was a little bit self-serving at first, because it kind of helped me to, at least with my peers and acquaintances, coworkers, whatever, to let them know what I'm experiencing. So I didn't have to spend so much energy explaining myself almost on a daily basis, and educating them and letting them know. And so also that I wouldn't hide my skin anymore, and I wouldn't be so embarrassed. Like at least people would know this is what she's dealing with, and they would already know. And showing my skin online, so I didn't feel like I had to, hide my skin in 80 something degree weather, so I kind of got ahead of it. And then it just snowballed into people really encouraging me to continue to do it. And this was before, there wasn't that kind of thing on social media yet. It was still pretty early on, and there wasn't that many communities. So I just kind of jumped ahead of it. I didn't want to have to I really did help me on a daily basis when it came to my friends and my family, because that's how much of a secret it was. And I think the secret made me feel more shame. So once I went out and people were so accepting and wow, I didn't know this. I see commercials for psoriasis, but I just thought it was like a rash, which is so much more than that. And that's another aspect of it. People think psoriasis is just like this aesthetic issue. And it's not. It's so much deeper than that. And so when people in the community started encouraging me, oh gosh, I'm not brave enough yet, please continue doing this, I did. And I got a lot of encouragement from, like I said, in the community and in my friends and family, keep on doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you kind of had this coming out party with your chronic illness. Instead of
did.
feeling like you had to hide your skin, once people knew about it, you were taking ownership of it, and then you could be public. You could dress appropriately for that LA heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about you made those t-shirts? Remind me
Oh,
what
yes,
those
yes,
t-shirts
yes.
said.
So I used to be an avid Disney person. I had a pass and everything. And during the winter and everything, I could and like fall and all that stuff, I could hide my skin. But then one day we were going and it was going to be like 90 something degrees. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to pass out. So I thought ahead and I made these shirts, and one of them said, you can't catch my psoriasis. And another one said, just like psoriasis isn't contagious or something like that. And I felt comfortable being in Disneyland, sweating and just like having my shirt. And I remember being in line for the Star Wars, like the Star Tours. And I remember someone like staring at my arm really intensely. And they kind of were like doing this like weird face. And then they glanced at my shirt, and I swear they were like, oh, they kind of were like, oh, okay. Like it totally relaxed them, and it totally relaxed me.
Yeah. And, that's the power of advocacy. And even that, just wearing a shirt is a form of advocacy and education to tell the world around you what's happening, so that, people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Right.
So if you give them something to understand, it's so unfair that that burden falls to you, because I know you also have psoriatic arthritis. I know you're also in constant pain from that and constant inflammation from that. So there's so much of this that is so unfair. It's like, not only do you have a disease, but you also have to educate the world about your needs so that you can even exist. But it falls to us, because no one else is going to do that for us. So Ilana, how about you? I mean, you have an incredible career in advocacy. You're a published author. When did you start being public about your chronic illness? What made that decision for you?
I think like Aimee, like it was very similar in that and exactly what you said, like I have to fight to exist outside of my house. And there's two things I always say. One is if you don't make it normal, they will always make it weird. So if you don't go out and talk about your illness like it is normal, other people are going to draw their own conclusions. So just like you were saying at Disney World with the shirt, like that makes a huge difference. And the other thing that I always say is the only thing more exhausting than having a chronic illness is pretending that you don't. And for me, I really started going public, I guess, when I was probably around, it wasn't long after my diagnosis, maybe like 20, 21, something like that. And my world was very small already, because I was so immunocompromised that really going certain places, and I lived in Florida. So like it was hot, and like I couldn't exist and function in most places. And the hot thing is just like I have dysautonomia as well. So I have I'll faint and heat and whatever.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah. But going public and the decision to go public, I think the way that I kind of went public was, again, this is in like the 2010s. So Instagram is there, but it's not as big as it is now. Blogs were really the big thing. So I had my own blog, and I started kind of writing my daily journey. And I really did it with the intent to explain what was happening to certain people in my family, because there were certain relatives that I had that were awful. They were just awful to me, that they didn't understand. They thought I was attention seeking. They just did not get it at all. And so I really wanted to put it out there. Like, this is what I'm going through. These are all the things that I'm trying to do to get better. Like, it's not like I'm just sitting here being sick and like wallowing in it. And so I was hoping that they would read and I wouldn't have to like force it on them. And so most people, most of the relatives that I was kind of aiming for, I just missed the mark and they didn't care, and that's okay. But all these other people found me, people who had chronic illnesses, people who didn't, people who were in my life in a variety of ways that I would never imagine would go and look at my blog, like old high school teachers and, people I went to school with and neighbors. And I don't even know how they found me, but they found it. And I think that something that I've constantly kept in mind over the years as I've done blogging and social media and now onto TikTok and all that stuff is like, what do I want to talk about and what do I not want to talk about? And whenever I have a topic that I'm like, oh, I can't talk about that, it's too personal, it's too shameful, I have to stop and I have to think, okay, but why? Why is it so shame? Why am I ashamed of this thing? If I'm going through this, then someone else is going through this. So like, if I don't make it normal, it's weird. So I really, I really do intentionally think about the things that, we kind of keep to ourselves that we feel are embarrassing or gross, or, no one's going to get it. And it's like, yeah, no one's going to get it if we don't talk about it. And so for me, it's very empowering to go there, to talk about all these things, to be an open book online. Because I know that this is helping other people. And I know that if I start the conversation, other people will continue it. And I've always found that to be the case.
Yeah. And, your blog was so popular that you were offered a book deal.
Yes. Yeah. So that was exciting because I had always wanted to write a book. Like as a young teenager, I always wanted to write a book. I was a book reviewer in like middle school and high school. And I always thought I would write like a young adult novel or something like that. I just didn't know what I was going to write. And then as I was writing this blog for several years and it started blowing up, I was contacted by people who were like, okay, do you want to write a book about it? And I was like, yes. And so that came to fruition in 2018. I published the book with New Harbinger, and it's called Surviving and Thriving with an Invisible Chronic Illness. And it's really for young adult patients, diagnosed or undiagnosed. And it talks about like real world advice for everything: dating, moving out of the house for the first time, dealing with school, dealing with college, dealing with work accommodations, and just how do I communicate to other people what is happening to me in a way that makes me feel empowered and makes them comfortable enough to keep talking about it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and my public advocacy career at this point sort of started by accident. I started podcasting in 2015 with a science fiction podcast. I am a massive nerd, and about a year into it, my health flared up very severely. I'm almost at the 6-year anniversary of this health flare up that I've been living in, where we've kind of gone back to the drawing board, trying to figure out what's going on with me. And, I have not gone back to work since because my energy windows are not wide enough and they're too unpredictable for me to have consistent employment. And it started to affect my podcast, and I had not said anything about it on my podcast. And it started to feel like I was lying to my audience, as small as it was. So I made an episode about my health. I had just been misdiagnosed with Lyme disease, but at the time I thought that I had Lyme disease. I did a 2-part episode called Maybe He's Born With It, Maybe It's Lyme Disease. And I heard from so many people. I was used to kind of podcasting into the void, and I had one major fan who really kept me going, and it was fantastic. But then I did this episode completely off topic from science fiction. I heard from so many people, and I got this email from a friend of mine that I knew from playing pinball here in Seattle. And, she said that her brother had been diagnosed with Lyme disease and had become completely distanced from the whole family. And her relationship with him had sort of diminished. And listening to my podcast, she's like, wow, now I finally feel like I understand a bit of what he's going through and maybe why he's pulled away from the family. And this was so important for me. And I really wanted to thank you for that. No one ever said anything like that about my science fiction podcasts. So, over time, my health got worse and I had to put that podcast down. And I had to put a lot of things down for my health. And I started thinking, I need to do something. I need to have something in my life that I do, that I hold myself to, that has flexibility in it to allow for my chronic illness. And I couldn't get it out of my mind, the responses I'd gotten from Maybe He's Born With It, Maybe It's Lyme Disease. And that's where the Major Pain podcast came from. I started it in 2021. So we just hit the year anniversary a couple months ago. And I just decided to tell my story in the first episode and then bring people on every subsequent episode to tell their stories, because I don't believe with the chronic illness, a mystery illness, something like Aimee, chronic fatigue syndrome. There's or even with Lyme disease. You know, there's so many different opinions about so many of these diseases. All these people online saying, I can cure you. This is what you need to do. I went to one of those people, spent way too much money, just made me worse.
Been there, been there. Yeah.
We've all been there. And that's the thing, is like, if we've all been there, why don't we all share our stories? You know? So I just wanted to make a collection of all of these stories. And I feel like there is no truth for everyone with chronic illness and with disability, but there's always individual truth. And the more individual truth you can absorb as someone who is searching for your truth, I feel like the easier it is to find. So that's kind of my intention with the podcast, is to just put ideas in people's heads, you know, not to tell people what to do ever, because I'm not qualified for that. I don't know what to do for myself. But I've learned so much, you know, I've learned so much about so many chronic illnesses, and I feel so much more adept at discussing them when I'm in my doctor's appointments. I'm bringing up things to look into because I've heard about, you know, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, mast cell activation syndrome, histamine intolerance, you know, primary immune deficiency, things I'd never heard of before that I can now bring in and say, hey, have we checked for this? And it's helped, you know, it's really helped me personally. And I hope that it's helped other people. But I'm curious to hear from the two of you. So what has the reaction been to you going public? Let's fast forward to the present day. How has going public about chronic illness changed your life or the lives of others? Let's start with Aimee.
Honestly, it gives me a purpose. Like, it was really important for me to find a silver lining when it came to this. Like, that's just how my brain works. Like, we talked about this, I think, pros and cons. Like, that's how my brain works. And I had to find something that made it worthwhile on a daily basis. And I feel like my pain has a purpose now. Like, I am talking to people every single day, 7 days a week, who are chronically ill, and some of them newly diagnosed. And those are the ones that kind of really need help. Like, they really do. Like, oh my gosh, what do I do from here? And so just being able to connect with them, like, I had a therapist that used to tell me that when I was in such a dark place or upset, he was like, get out of yourself, get out of self, go help someone else, go talk to someone else, be of service to someone else, and get out of that. And it has been so helpful to me. It really has. Like, ruminating on the negative and feeling sorry for yourself and angry. I mean, yeah, it's okay to feel that sometimes. We need to honor our emotions, of course, but getting out of that space and being like, okay, this is about someone else. Because for me alone, I wasn't able to find the silver lining just being by myself suffering with this. Like, it's the community part that I really get so much benefit from. It's like my own little secret world where I'm struggling all day long in an able-bodied world. Okay, like, which is not easy, you guys know. And getting to like delve into these online communities and really get in touch with the people and be reminded myself that I'm not alone. Like, here they are thinking that I'm just helping them sometimes, but like, really, it's such a mutual exchange. It really is for me.
Yeah. Can you give us any specific instances of people you've heard from that you've helped?
There's one girl, actually, she's also from LA. We have so much in common. And she was in such a dark place when we first met online. And now she's got such a much more of like a no big deal energy about it. Kind of like, okay, I one thing she would get stuck on was like the negative, right? Like, she would ruminate on that. And like, through just talking for a couple of years, like, I've seen her just be so much more confident, like posting selfies with like showing her skin and like really going and finding doctors that are right for her. Because that was another thing that was really upsetting to her, was like, I saw this doctor, I saw that doctor, it didn't work out. And I'm like, girl, it's like dating. It's not going to happen. Like, it's not love at first sight. Like, it takes a while. And it is such a labor intensive, like energy draining situation trying to look, I'm sure you understand, for those doctors that are like the right fit. It takes some time. It really does. And the same goes for treatments too. Like, some people get really discouraged, like, after trying one thing, but I'm like, it's just like, dating too. Like, not everything is the right match the first date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes you need to spend a couple of weeks with a medication to find out if you're good snuggle buddies or not.
Right. Or like
don't know why I
spend
said that.
time spend time with a doctor for a couple months or even 6 months. And if it ain't it, it ain't it. Move on. Like
Yeah.
but don't give up. Like don't give up.
Yes.
Doesn't mean there are a lot of great doctors out there. Don't let one deter you from getting the relief you deserve.
Absolutely. And I just have to say a special thank you before they have to leave. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but Kosar, thank you so much for helping get us set up today.
Thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate your help and your troubleshooting. You did amazing work. So thank you. Thank you. There he is. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Ilana, how about you? You've done so much advocacy work. You've written a book. Do you hear from people that have read your book that it has helped them, that say thank you, or people from your advocacy work?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's one of the best parts about having accessible social media is you do get that feedback. And, I think going public has really made me consider a lot of things. It's been very therapeutic for me in general, just going out, sharing my story, talking about it on social media, because it can be so isolating. And also, I think the most meaningful messages that I get are not even the ones who relate to my disease or my experiences, but the ones who relate and understand the kind of advocacy work that I'm trying to do and now want to do it themselves. Because advocacy can be really intimidating. I know for all of us, for anybody who has an illness that wants to go out and start talking and sharing their story, you really do like ruminate on like, what do I share? What do I not share? How much do people get to know about this part of my life? And there are so many ways to be an advocate. You don't have to go to Capitol Hill and march. You don't have to have you don't have to write a book. You don't have to, there's so many ways that you can make it your own and make a difference. And I think, Jesse, you're a great example. Like, you're this amazing podcast host and transitioned it to advocacy. And, whether you're a writer, you're an artist, you're, a director, there are so many ways that you can reach people who have a chronic illness or some kind of disability that really need to be reached. Like how many of us just sat in the closet in those first couple months of our diagnosis and just felt so alone. So, anything that we can do that helps us come out of our shell, is therapeutic for us, gets the story and the information out, teaches others, is phenomenal in any way that we wish to do it. So for me, it's been just a great experience, and I've been doing it now for years. And my mission right now is I'm really trying to push on Generation Z, because they're really the leaders of this thought process that it doesn't have to be shameful. This is a part of who I am, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it. They are the experts at that. So I'm hoping that any advocacy work that I do now is going to fall into that generation and, make it a hot topic for them to discuss and make it normal.
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, I think the biggest thing that starting the podcast has done is that it has integrated the two halves of myself, where my chronic illness was hidden for years. I had it in balance for a while. I was working 4 days a week. As long as I didn't push too hard and, overexert myself too much, ate healthy, exercised moderately, I was able to kind of keep it in check and function relatively normally. And I would have bad days, and they would happen behind closed doors. So thank you so much, Kosar. Thank you. We appreciate you. So then when I flared up and I couldn't go to work anymore, all of a sudden I was just completely hidden from society. I was completely isolated.
Yes.
And I had just spent years sort of hiding that part of me, not really intentionally, but mostly because, what am I supposed to do on a day where I don't feel well? I lie on the couch. So switching that mindset to being, okay, well, this is part of me too. This part of me that lies on the couch all day, this is part of me too. Is there a way that version of me can be productive, that version of me can exist in society instead of being hidden away? And, there is a lot of shame in being an individual in society whose body is not functioning normally, and I hate that because my normal is not your normal. So this is normal for me, like not functioning normally is normal for me. But when we hide that part away, when we hide those pieces away from society that society deems to be outside of what is normal, it becomes sort of like a internal practice of hiding that part. It stops being about society. It starts being about me. It's like, I don't go out to see friends or invite friends over on days where I don't feel well, because I don't want them to see me having muscle spasms or stuttering or having weird neurological issues. And starting the podcast, it's like, that's what it's all about. It's all about talking about those things and connecting with other people who are experiencing those things. And I also have a TikTok for the podcast and an Instagram as well. And I've started sharing what happens to me on my bad days. For the first time ever, I posted a video of me just like spasming out of control. And also, take that video into my doctors, and that really helped. When you have an invisible illness, like take a video when you're having a bad day, because that might make a difference with your doctors. So once I put that piece of me out in the world, it then made it okay for me to be seen either standing or in a wheelchair. It really helped with that transition for me into using a wheelchair, because that happened right around when I started the podcast as well. And I remember seeing Maya, I'm a Roll With It on TikTok, who at the time when I first discovered her, she was saying, I have this mystery illness, I need to use a wheelchair sometimes. And I'm like, that's me. That's me. I've never heard anyone else say those words before, and now I've heard so many people say it on the podcast and just through the chronic illness community online. And her saying that helped me to make that transition that my body needed. And I've heard from other people that me talking about it has helped them to make that transition. And that is incredibly gratifying. This paying it forward of needing examples of people living through something similar when you're living through something rare. And if it's rare, how are you going to find those examples? But the internet provides that. The internet, everything's on the internet, literally everything. Go look for it. If you want to find it, it's there, except for, sometimes good information about rare illnesses is not on the internet, but everything else. But finding personal experience from people with those illnesses, that's something that's so valuable. And that's the library that I'm building on the podcast that I'm so incredibly proud of. And when I hear from people that it's helping them, it just really fuels me. It gives me purpose and a passion. It allows me to use my creative tools. It's something that I never would have done in a million years until I got sick. And having that direct pathway through something that was so painful into something that I'm so proud of, it really helps to reframe what I'm experiencing. It really gives me something to live for and to strive for, which is so amazing. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to know, like, things that you have shared with the public that you feel like have resonated the most. What are the messages that you really want to get out there? We talked a little bit, Aimee, you talked a little bit about how sometimes you need to keep trying new doctors. That one is massive. I say that all the time. If your doctor's not helping you, try another one and keep trying until you find someone who listens to you. If they try to gaslight you, if they try to tell you what you're experiencing isn't real, they are not worth seeing. So try someone else. There's no law against trying as many doctors as you can. If you run out of doctors in your medical center, switch medical centers. That's what I did. And it helped.
Wrong. They villainize doctor shopping. And it's like, I'm going to search for the right doctor. Like, that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. So what are the other big things that you want to share? Ilana, let's start with you.
Oof. There's so many things. I mean, medical gaslighting is such a huge issue right now, and there are ways to combat it. But I think the most important thing to know and understand is that when you walk out of an appointment where you have been medically gaslit, you're not alone. This is a doctor that's definitely done this to somebody else before. So you get on Google and you give them a review, and you let the other patients who are going to come after you know to expect this. And just that, like you said, there are other fish in the sea. You do not need to feel that this one doctor's opinion or lack of an opinion is indicative of what you are experiencing. Every medical school had someone graduate in the bottom of their class. Unfortunately, you may have seen that doctor.
Yep.
So just keep going, keep moving along. And I guess my other big message is don't be afraid to share your story because somebody else is living it and they need to hear you. They need to meet you. I think one of the most gratifying things for me is I had when I moved from South Florida to the Pacific Northwest and I had to restart with all my doctors, I had to explain dysautonomia to my new primary care physician. They didn't understand it. They didn't know what was going on. And so I Googled it and I was like, I'm going to pull up some articles for you and I'm going to bring them in. And as I Googled, my articles came up and I was like, well, okay, here we go. So if you go ahead and you start putting your information out there, it's going to become the resource that maybe even you will still need down the line.
Amazing. How about you, Aimee?
It's pretty similar to what she just said. But I do encourage people to advocate for themselves, like not just lean on the community, but like, don't be afraid to speak up, ask questions. Don't be afraid to look a little bit neurotic if you have like a notepad in your phone this long of things you want to talk about. Take that moment with your doctor and really assert yourself and take advantage of every minute because they want to be out of there in 15. My sister's a doctor, so I know they want to be out of there in 15 minutes. So like, just really take the time and also don't rely on the experts to tell you everything about your own disease. You know what I mean? Like we end up being our own experts. Like I actually learned more from the community members on online like support groups. I learn more on there than I do in a doctor's office, like things that they never bring up ever, what to expect. And I know that sometimes it could be scary researching a lot online, but like, do it and then ask your doctor, and if it's not the right one, it'll be revealed. And then I also encourage people to not just rely on like medical doctors, because this is really heavy mentally and emotionally. So if they are able to, please get in to see a mental health professional if you can, to help you manage this.
Yes.
Because, you can't do it alone and you can't just do it with a medical doctor. There's things that they're not going to be able to help you with. And some of the things that have helped me the most with chronic illness have been the stuff that has happened up here and not in here. Yeah. And that's acceptance and speaking up for myself, a level of confidence that you do kind of need, especially if it's something that you like. Lots of times, we're seeing like the doctors are up here and we're kind of down here. But at the end of the day, we are the experts on our own body. We know when something is off. The blood work in the labs can look amazing, but we know when something is wrong.
Yes.
Absolutely. And piggybacking off that, the message that I really want to get out in the world is living inside of this maelstrom of doctor's appointments and symptoms and flare-ups and all of this. Take time every single day to feel joy. Find something that makes you happy and do it. If it's sitting outside in the sun, do it. If it's playing your favorite video game, do it. And don't feel bad about it. Take some time to feel good. Make sure that while you are fighting for yourself and advocating for yourself, that you are also living your life and every day doing something that makes your life a little bit better or builds towards the future that you want. Don't wait to do those things until you get a diagnosis. Don't wait until you get your different medications ironed out or whatever it is that you're doing, because it can feel like that's all you can do in that moment. But live your life also, like take it from someone who's still undiagnosed at 37 years old. When I started living and searching for an answer instead of just lying on the couch and waiting for doctor's appointments, that's when I started to get a little bit better. It can help to get some movement, listen to your body, do what you need to do every day to be happy, because being happy is the goal. And that's all that really matters. So, the rest of it is kind of window dressing. Unless you are happy, you could be completely healthy and very unhappy. So that, just find ways to be happy. That's my big message. So we are running out of time, but I want to make sure that everyone knows where to go to check out your amazing contributions to advocacy for the chronic illness community. So Ilana, where can people find your work?
I'm at Ilana_Jacqueline on Instagram and TikTok, and IlanaJacqueline.com has all my links and everything else.
And how about you, Aimee?
It's Aimee Stephanie Perez, AIMEE, Stephanie with a PH and Perez with a Z. And that's pretty much across the board, but I'm very active on Instagram more than anything.
Awesome. And you can find the Major Pain Podcast on all major podcast platforms. Just search for Major Pain. You can go directly to our website, majorpainpodcast.com, find links to every podcast platform there. You can also find the podcast on social media on Instagram and TikTok, both at Major Pain Podcast. This has been so fun. I am like beyond thrilled that the two of you agreed to do this today. You were, like I said, you were my two first choices. And I just knew that we would have a blast talking to each other. Check out both of their episodes on the Major Pain Podcast because they are fantastic episodes. And I know that there's so much more we could have gone into today. So definitely follow these amazing people on their respective platforms to hear everything they have to say about chronic illness and advocacy, because there is a lot there. So thank you all so much. Thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you to the Connect Trust Society. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you so much, Susan, in the chat. We appreciate you. And everyone, take care of yourselves and have an amazing day. Thank you for joining us.